Later today, Diamond and 6 other CEOs of the nation's largest banks will appear before the Senate Banking Committee. And joining me right now ahead of it is North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer. He is a member of the Budget and Banking Committees. Senator, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Maria.
So what's most important? What are you expecting today?
Well, a couple of things. You know, I think the bank presidents themselves would like to talk about regulation, and they are clearly very regulated by multiple agencies, as you know, and these days they're facing competition in the banking world that aren't as regulated as they are, and I think that'll be part of the discussion. For me, I'm on a focus on some of the ESG stuff as it relates to climate risk and climate risk tests, and also talk about this whole merchant category, this new merchant category set up by ISO that has forced the 3 credit card companies to designate gun ownership as a category, or at least gun sales as a category. It's very concerning to me, and I want to see how the banks plan to respond to the credit card companies who are responding to the International Standards Organization.
Yeah, I love that. I want to get into the ESG in a moment, but let's talk about this because you're leading an effort to push back on Visa, American Express, MasterCard, and their gun purchase tracking policy. You sent a letter to the president of the Banking Policy Institute saying in part, quote, banks should not misuse their power to hinder the ability of law-abiding Americans to exercise a constitutional right by creating de facto bans on legal firearm purchases. Senator, I mean, this has so many complications. Where is this leading? This may very well, you know, cause others to say, well, we're going to track you for this and track you for that.
Right. So one of the ways, Maria, that liberals have attacked gun ownership, legal, constitutionally protected gun ownership, is by trying to choke off their capital. And some of that's through the ESG movement. A lot of it's through things like the international standards now, which was, by the way, led by a bank. Amalgamated Bank, a large liberal bank, is pushing this left-wing agenda. The problem with all of that is that banks are heavily regulated, as I've talked about. They are federally insured, which is not unimportant. I think that puts them in a different category in terms of their legal requirements. And so when you start pushing the value chain, if you can't get a bank to do it, you know, get the credit card companies to do it. If the credit card companies won't create this category, let's go to the international standards, and that is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. So now, and don't get me wrong, even voluntary international standards are important. Obviously, the interoperability of the technology is all important in international commerce. However, I think the United States of America ought to set the standards, not some international organization in Geneva, Switzerland. So what I want to do is I want to establish who in this value chain, who in this capital finance, supply chain is going to stand up to this left-wing nonsense and not become a tool of the left, but rather be the banks that we need you to be.
Well, speaking of left-wing nonsense, we have to talk about ESG and this whole of government approach to make sure everybody is disclosing their climate risk. President Biden apparently is taking a victory lap on the climate change at the UN General Assembly yesterday. He claims that investments will reduce costs for clean energy technologies across the world, even calling it a global game changer. Senator, his comments on, his most recent victory with the Manchin bill basically told us it's not an Inflation Reduction Act at all. It's a climate change bill.
Well, I think once that gig was up, they had to admit, even though they called it inflation reduction, it was inflation enhancement. And to Jamie Dimon's point, that this runaway government spending, this supercharging the demand side of our economy while the supply side continues to be hurt by it, it has led to this inflation. We need to get our arms wrapped around that. With regard to the ESG piece of it, that's part of the problem. They continue to they being the left, again, use capital, use the highly regulated banking industry as well as the index industry to try and shape their policies in ways that they can't get done, by the way, through the legislative process. And it's very unfair. It's in my view, I think a lot of it is in fact illegal. This is why I introduced the Fair Access to Banking Act. This is why I joined Senator Sullivan's Index Act, to make sure that there's a loud noise in the right ear of these bank presidents and CEOs and their boards who are responding to the loud noise in their left ear through, activist investors and even staff members. So we need to rebalance all of this. I think, quite honestly, that the banks themselves would just as soon get in the business of banking. They have enough problems with the SEC and the FDIC and the Federal Reserve and the Comptroller of the Currency and the CFPB. They have enough problems there without having to deal with these highly charged political fights.
Yeah, and Jamie Dimon responded to this issue yesterday when Rashida Tlaib asked him if the bank has a policy against funding new oil and gas products. It was unbelievable. Watch this.
Please answer with a simple yes or no.
Absolutely not, and that would be the road to hell for America.
What do you think? Jamie took that on.
Well, this is why you and I love Jamie Dimon, because every now and then he's unfiltered and he speaks truth to power, and he's willing to do that, and that's what's so important, and good for him for doing exactly that. I don't know a single bank president that wants to destroy the American economy, and yet you have a lot of the people in power that are pushing them to do exactly that because they have some fantasy that somehow tomorrow we can be at net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Never mind that they're just, for the most part, want to transfer this climate guilt to polluting countries so that they can feel better about themselves. It's crazy, and I think people like Jamie Dimon, Brian Moynihan, David Solomon, the others that I've talked to, they're looking for real solutions to a transition that doesn't destroy the American economy. We can provide that, you know, through modern technologies and innovations, but certainly not through regulation.
As if the left policies has not destroyed this economy enough. Senator, I got to take your attention to what we're looking at on the screen right now. We've got live pictures of Port Authority. Another migrant bus has arrived at Port Authority in New York City. There are women and children coming off of this bus, as well as adult males. They are coming into Port Authority. We don't know what their intentions are or where they're going from here. But this border crisis is really erupting now that Abbott is saying, okay, 7,000 people a day coming into Texas. We're going to put them on buses and we're going to send them to big cities, left-run cities, rather, so that your colleagues on the left understand what's taking place here.
And good for him for doing it, and shame on these liberal mayors from these liberal sanctuary cities who have, you know, lectured all of us for years about our lack of compassion, and now all of a sudden they're the ones that are whose hypocrisy is being exposed. So hopefully this can lead to better policy outcomes. Right now it seems to just be leading to anger on their front. In fact, they're the ones claiming that Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis and others are the ones that lack compassion, when the reality is they're just simply exposing this hypocrisy, which hopefully ultimately can lead to better policies.
Well, they say that they run sanctuary cities, but no sanctuary if it's in their backyard. That's a different story.
Well, that's the hypocrisy.
Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks very much.
Always good to see you.
Thank you,
Maria.
Kevin Cramer is in D.C. this morning.